Who is? Get Ramsey set up? Yeah, she's on set. Thank you. Malcolm, she's got
Hey.
Thank you. We got it.
Morning, everyone.
You got it right.
Good morning. I'm going to call the March 24th meeting of the Board of Trustees at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill to order, and ask the Secretary of the Board, Malcolm Turner, to call the roll, please.
Mrs. Irish-Neal?
Here.
Mr. Bryan?
Here.
Mr. Davis? Dr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Cotis?
Here.
Mr. McCullen? Mr. Meekins?
Here.
Mr. Patel?
Here.
Mr. Pryor?
Here.
Mr. Richards?
Here.
I am present. Mrs. White?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. As chair, I've tried to involve students as much as possible in our meetings, and we have had several a cappella groups come sing the national anthem. This morning, I've invited Junior Taylor Lloyd, a major. She is a double major in psychology and music, and she has a concentration in classical voice. So if everyone wouldn't mind standing for the singing of our national anthem. Thank you, Taylor. That reminds us of the variety and myriad of talented students that we have here at the university. And it also reminds us of the faith we have in our democracy in our country. As chair of the Board of Trustees, it is my responsibility at every meeting to remind all members of the board their duty under the State Government Ethics Act to avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of conflict of interest as required by the Act. Each member has received the agenda and related information for this Board of Trustees meeting. If any board member knows of any conflict or of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matter coming before the Board of Trustees at this meeting, the conflict or appearance of conflict should be identified at this time. Do any members of the board have a conflict or an appearance of a conflict? Hearing none, thank you. Before we move on to remarks, do I have a motion? Having read the materials listed under the consent agenda, is there any item that needs to be moved to the discussion portion of either the open session or closed session of the agenda. Trustees, are there any items that you'd like to be removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, then do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? I have a motion from Trustee Patel and a second from Trustee Davis. Any discussion? Since Ms. White is on Zoom, I think we do need to do a roll call per statute, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Artis-Neal? Mr. Bryan?
Yes.
Mr. Davis? Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Codis? Mr. McCullen? Mr. Meekins? Mr. Patel? Mr. Pryor?
Yes.
Mr. Richards? I am a yes. Mrs. White?
Yes.
And Mr. Bullock?
And the chair is a yes. Thank you. Well, good morning. I'd like to start this morning by personally thanking all the current trustees for their participation and help in last night's Davy Award dinner. We were allowed and honored to award 11 outstanding servants of this university the William Richardson Davy Award. Dr. Phil Clay, Governor Roy Cooper, Robin Hadley, Joan Huntley, posthumously, Gene Kitchen, Speaker of the North Carolina House, Tim Moore, David Pardue, Steve and Debbie Vetter, and Coach Roy Williams and his wife, Wanda. I thought the night was very good. It was an opportunity for people to socialize and get back to the university who may not have been in the university over the last 2 years, and got to see a lot of happy faces. And it is good to be back. So in a few moments, I anticipate that, well, actually through the consent agenda, this board approved the first ever all funds budget approved by a board of trustees in the modern era of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. This budget is an example of delegated authority at the campus level. Since it is the Board of Trustees that works most closely with the Chancellor, the administration, and the deans, the Board of Trustees, I believe, is uniquely positioned to advise and ultimately approve a budget. The budget is a prospective instrument. The university now has a financial roadmap that can be used to achieve its strategic initiatives. This budget is the product of many hours of work from CFO Nate Knuffman. Nate, if you'd stand, please. And is Steve here? Did Steve come? Okay, and Steve Agostini, their team. Becky, I know you had a lot to do with that. If you would also stand. And I'd like to give you guys a round of applause for all your work. You know, the Chancellor also dove into this process, and you dove into this process from the time you were an interim moving forward. So I want to thank you for that. Members of this board, including in particular Vice Chair John Pryor and Trustee Marty Codis, have really brought their business expertise to the table and have helped shape the budget. And I want to thank them for their participation in some work groups. As the Chancellor said yesterday, I may have mentioned it as well, we had even several Saturday morning meetings that went for 3 hours. His team looked at, again, I think looked at 1,700 different requests, individual requests from units within the school requesting specific things in the budget. And Nate and the Chancellor, Becky, that whole team took a look at each one of those line items and really dug into folding that in to a budget and making sure that those requests lined up with the strategic plan of the university. The board voiced clearly its desire to make sure that we are good stewards of the more than $566 million in taxpayer contributions, the $528 million we receive each year in tuition and fees from our customers who are the students. And they're also our mission, right? the students are our mission, and we heard from one today. I mean, that's our mission. We also voiced clearly a desire to make sure that the millions of dollars received directly through returns from private donors, Vice Chancellor Ruth and all your team's work collecting private donor resources, and the returns we get on the investment of those resources. We also have a commitment to making sure that grants received from agencies in the federal government and from private foundations are utilized to achieve world-changing results in research. Shortly, the Chancellor will introduce our new interim Vice Chancellor of Research, who will lead the research effort across campus and work with the Chancellor and all campus units in an effort to continually assure the integrity of that enterprise. The broad priorities are clear and are represented in this budget. We are committed to providing a world-class education to North Carolina students at an affordable cost. In order to provide that world-class education, we need to support a world-class faculty. This budget specifically provides additional funding to support faculty retention. That was a top priority of every member of this board. The university is also demonstrating fiscal responsibility moving forward with this prospective instrument that gives the Chancellor and his team and each individual unit the ability to look over the field of play and know exactly what they have to work with in order to achieve results consistent with the strategic plan and consistent with our mission, which is to be the greatest university in the world. So, with that said, I'm going to leave it at that because I think I said enough last night. And certainly nobody at this table wants to hear any more from me. But I do want to, at this time, recognize our student body president, Lamar Richards. President, well, I call you Trustee Richards during the meeting. I think most people on campus call you President Richards. But Trustee Richards, I want to thank you for your service to the university. And in that effort, I will ask the secretary, Mr. Secretary, will you read the resolution, please?
Whereas Lamar G. Richards has served as a valuable and appreciated member of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill Board of Trustees in his capacity as the UNC-Chapel Hill Student Body President during the 2021-22 academic year. And whereas Mr. Richards diligently illustrated his deep commitment to representing the student body by sharing candid student-centered feedback and needs in his work with the board. And whereas Mr. Richards' unfailing and passionate commitment to enact institutional change to better meet the needs of marginalized students helped make the Carolina campus more welcoming for everybody. And whereas Mr. Richards was a valued voice in board discussions as a member of the External Relations Committee and the University Affairs Committee. And whereas Mr. Richards provided additional support for the university as a member of the Council of Student Body Presidents for the UNC system. And whereas Mr. Richards has demonstrated leadership and dedication to the university through his work on the Carolina Union Board of Directors, the General Alumni Association Board, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People Board of Higher Education Strategy, the Campus and Community Advisor Committee, among others. And whereas Mr. Richards, during his term as student president, started the Distinguished Lectureship on Racial Equity and Belonging. And whereas Mr. Richards provided invaluable guidance, insight, and leadership in working with students, faculty, staff, administrators, and his fellow trustees on a number of timely issues, including supporting the continuing campus response to COVID-19, successfully championing internet stipends for students studying remotely through his work with the Commission on Campus Equality and Student Equity, displaying leadership and compassion in support of the mental health needs of our community, and working to make Carolina a more welcoming campus. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill thanks and congratulates Lamar Richards for his dedication to the university, his hard work, and outstanding service in student government and as a trustee, and wishes him every success in his future pursuits as a proud Carolina alumnus.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It is also a tradition at the university that a leaving member of the Board of Trustees be gifted a replica of the old well. And I have that here for Trustee Richards. It is engraved to him, and we hope that you're able to keep it and use it as a remembrance of your service. So for record-keeping purposes, I move that the resolution recognizing President Lamar Richards be accepted and approved by acclamation.
Second.
I have a second. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. So with that being said, Trustee Richards.
All right. First of all, thank you for the honor, and I appreciate it. And I figure I might as well give my remarks on this side. This is my final remarks. First, as I prepare to make remarks as a final time as student body president, I want to introduce once more and recognize the Durham native currently serving as president of the Black Student Movement, chair of the Criminal Justice Committee for the UNC-NAACP, treasurer of the Ebony Theater, and program director of her own nonprofit, Bright Brain Tutoring. And this outstanding description is none other but a glimpse into the accolades of our incoming student body president, Talijah Teddy Van, who is a political science and film studies double major, as well as a Covenant Scholar, Greenhouse Scholar, and Eve Carson Scholar. Please join me in congratulating our new student body president who is here today. As I reflect on my year as student body president, there is only one word to suitably describe this experience, and that word is blessed. I have been so truly blessed and fortunate to work alongside the most effective and talented colleagues, while also having the distinct honor to represent the best student body on the face of the earth. So yes, despite all of the challenges, adversity, hurdles, and headlines, I have been truly blessed to serve as UNC's 100th student body president. So today, since we heard a comprehensive and thoughtful presentation from student government yesterday, I figured I would deviate from speaking directly about our achievements and areas of improvement over the past year, and instead speak to you all about my time visiting Stanford University last week. While at Stanford, speaking about the success of our Richard Epps Emerging Leaders Program here at UNC, and talking about the ways of collaboration, I spoke to them about a concept that is ingrained in the work I've did over the past year and should be ingrained in the work of every institution of higher education across the country. And that is, how do we support the wholeness of a student? How do we aid in the successful admission and retention of every single student, while bolstering our successes and continually addressing areas of weakness in tandem? And while this sounds daunting, it's honestly a simple question. How do we support the wholeness of a student? What does it mean to revolutionize the Carolina experience so that every single student graduating from our university is empowered with the resources to become stewards of goodwill, upholders of democracy, and flame keepers of our society? To be frank, it's much easier said than done when you have to navigate the complex systems of shared governance, a term we say and write 1 million times a week, yet no single person truly knows the honest definition of what that truly means, including me. Supporting the wholeness of each and every student means that our university must move away from the one-size-fits-all view of higher education and provide a more modern and applicable opportunities for students to engage creatively alongside the university, both in the classroom and out. I've asked myself repeatedly, how is it possible for UNC to have went through rough periods of politically charged scandal, extreme partisanship, negative and critical headlines, and a global pandemic? How is it possible that this place has withstood all of that and is still remaining that shining beacon of light on the hill? It's the students. It's the heartbeat of the first year headed across campus for their first time, trying to find their classes. It's the thrill of rushing Franklin Street for the first or even the second time, or the excitement of attending Fall Fest and registering for student orgs and events. And yes, it's the protests and the advocacy and activism of this body of students that have also sustained the heartbeat of this great place. There is so much more to our university than even what most people know. We're more than a school for sports or a school with $1 billion research enterprise. We are the place where dreams are born, lifelong friendships and marriages are cultivated, where the hopeless come to be revived and the creative comes to have their thirst quenched. Carolina is a special place for faculty, staff, alum, and the great state of North Carolina. But it is most special for the students that maintain the very flame of this university. So for those that didn't know, I am a proud native of our sister state, South Carolina. And I figured, since we talk about North Carolina so much, and rightfully so, that I would bring something from my home state that has truly gotten me through some of my roughest periods during my time here. And that is our state motto, which reads, "While I breathe, I hope." And I think this is how I would like to leave this role, with hope. A hope so everlasting and so sufficient that no matter what, I have faith in this place to focus critically on the wholeness of each and every student. And not just ask, how do we get them here? Or even, how do we keep them here? We as a university should be asking, how do we cultivate dynamic and thriving areas of student wellness, student success, and academic achievement? How do we bolster support for the social sciences and humanities while cementing our leading engagement in STEM? How do we address the critical pipeline and retention issues for graduate students of color by effectively paying them livable wage? And how do we create more intentional spaces of collaboration where we house these spaces permanently to ensure our university will always be a place where the richness of diversity, equity, and inclusion can flow into every decision we make? While I nor anyone here has the answers to all of these questions, one thing is for sure: the answers start and stop with all of you, the trustees of our great university. You have inherited a task that many do not envy, and even fewer truly grasp. So few understand the taxing unpaid labor that goes into this passion of love. Because I have to believe that is why you all do this, because you truly love this place. For whatever divinely ordered reason, you ended up here, and I have to believe that as a part of God's larger plan, this is where you belong. You love this place. So in times of disagreement and untenable situations, and trust me, there will be more than enough, remember that you all love this place. And no matter your differences or the situation at hand, you must always start and finish on that shared point, your love for this place. And always renew your commitment to our chancellor, his team, and the outstanding faculty, staff, and student leaders that support our university to carry out its mission as they do every single day. While I breathe, I hope. I hope for each of you. I hope for our students, and I hope that this special place, this shining light, beacon of light on the hill, continues to be a place where dreams are realized. Thank you for this amazing opportunity, and my well wishes are with you.
Thank you, Trustee Richards. At this time, I'll ask the Chancellor to give some remarks. Thank you, Chancellor Gusper.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Bullock, for your remarks earlier in Lamar. Trustee Richards, thank you for wonderful comments this morning, and thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your advocacy and, for the students' advocacy for this university that clearly we all know that you love. And we appreciate all that you've done over this past year, and I know there's more to come. You got another year left. So I want to just briefly touch on something Chair Bullock said earlier, and that is to reflect on last evening's Davy Award. It was a very special evening here at Carolina Inn. We celebrated 11 incredible Tar Heels who have lived lives of service to this great university that we all love. And I think everything that's good about Carolina was in the room last night. And I think you saw that, you felt that for those of you that were here. It truly was a great day to be a Tar Heel, as we like to say. And I think in a few minutes, we're going to showcase in two presentations a little more of what is really good about this incredible university and what's happening here at Carolina. Before we do that, I just want to touch on a few things that have occurred over the past few months since we last met in mid to late January as a board. First, last month, I had the honor to welcome President Ron Daniels from Johns Hopkins University, who was here for a lecture that was sponsored by the Graduate School and the Program for Public Discourse. And his latest book, of which I've provided a copy for all of our trustees, is with you. I highly recommend to everybody in the room What Universities Owe Democracy. It looks at the indispensable role that universities play in nurturing democratic values. And as a university, as a leading global public research university, we have a responsibility, especially as the nation's first public university. As I like to say often, you've heard me say it, not only the first, but the most public of the publics. We're passionately public at Carolina. We have to think about how the responsibility that we hold in preparing future voters, to educating North Carolina citizens on the issues of our day. It means tackling issues that are difficult. As Ron Daniels said that day, here as part of his lecture, he said, ultimately we, meaning the universities, have to model the difficult discussions and show that they can be waged. Program for Public Discourse that we've talked about and is going strong is doing just that, along with our faculty in our classrooms every day. Prior to Ron's lecture that afternoon, he participated in a series of meetings with faculty and students about the university's role in the stewardship of facts and why higher education is sometimes criticized, and that we have to do a better job of amplifying the importance of facts, the creation of new knowledge, the dissemination of that new knowledge, and the stewardship of facts, and the cultivation of what he calls a pluralistic and diverse communities. It's not about just having a diverse student body, but it's about ensuring that once we have that diverse student body and the diverse faculty, that we have the programming in place that allows those different lived experiences of that community to come alive, to help the curriculum come alive, and that others can thrive and learn from those different lived experiences. And that's something that we're committed to here. And I hope that you'll enjoy reading Ron's book, What Universities Owe Democracy, and perhaps we can have some future conversations, discussions here within the board about these important topics. Second, I want to just say that I'm proud of the progress that we're making on our UNC system 5-year goals and benchmarks, which we announced in late February. I put out in a campus message, and as we submitted our report down to the system office, and there's real impact with meeting and exceeding these goals. And I like to tell people it's not just about the numbers, that we're up 7% in this area, up 18% in this area, but it's about the real impact that progress has on people. When we reported that enrollments of students from rural areas and in low-income economic brackets have increased over the last 5 years, we were describing hundreds more students from across our big and diverse state who found a welcome home right here in Chapel Hill at our great university. When we reported improve graduation rates for low-income students. We were talking about hundreds of young people who were able to finish their studies here at Carolina in time and as debt-free as possible. Something that is really important to us, and I know important to those who fund our great university, General Assembly and the Board of Governors. Growth in science and technology degrees means more students who are meeting the growing demand in North Carolina for talented thinkers in critical fields is important. More than $1 billion in sponsored research translates into new discoveries, new jobs, and improvements in health and well-being that change the lives of all of those here in Chapel Hill, but goes far beyond the boundaries of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and the nation. The way in which innovation and entrepreneurship has become part of our fabric of Carolina. We talked a bit about that yesterday with our innovation hub, and the creation of that is going to be critically important as we move forward. So we're setting ambitious goals on our campus and remain committed to meeting those goals. And I had the opportunity about 2.5 weeks ago to present at the American Council of Education meeting out in San Diego alongside some other university leaders about the importance of setting ambitious goals, using metrics for setting a path, a course, a roadmap, and then celebrating that whenever you meet those goals. And we have a lot to celebrate here, and I couldn't be happier about that. But to be able to present that and showcase some of this work on the national stage is important for our university. Third and finally, last week, I went to Durham Tech to announce the first program of our Carolina Cross 100 initiative. It's called Our State, Our Work. And we launched Carolina Cross 100, as you know, last year at our, I think it was our May meeting when Anita Brown Graham spoke to the board and talked about this incredible opportunity. And as you know, that the goal is to determine how Carolina can best partner with and serve communities in each of our 100 North Carolina counties. I could not be more proud of the work that this team has put forth in this past year, working alongside over 100 undergraduate students and Anita Brown Graham and her team. And I think this is really going to be one of the first initiatives. I'm going to show you a very brief video showcasing the announcement of this just last week ago yesterday up at Durham Tech. But the team spent a good part of this past fall conducting surveys to determine the most important and effective ways to deploy our efforts. And many people said that employment and workforce concerns, employment insecurities were a top priority. Anita showcased the fact that 11% of North Carolinians between the ages of 18 and 24 are disconnected from either school or the workplace. That's a problem. That's a problem for our future. It's a problem that we're going to address. And so we launched Our State, Our Work to focus on linking young people with employment and educational opportunities. And this has the opportunity to be a game changer for the state of North Carolina. So I'm grateful to Anita Brown Graham, along with her team, NC Impact and the School of Government for helping to get this project off the ground. And I'm going to just show this brief, I think it's about 1.5 minute video here. Decided to do something special, and that was to launch Carolina Cross 100 to determine how Carolina could best partner with and serve communities in each of our 100 counties here in North Carolina.
We're not entering this playing field without existing players and existing playbooks that are working. We have no intention of getting in the way of that. In fact, what we hope we're able to do is lift up what's working and share it with other communities so that they can benefit.
Carolina Cross 100 reflects our fundamental identity as the nation's first public university.
We're going to try to strengthen the infrastructure of cross-sector collaboratives that are trying to serve these opportunity youth.
And fulfill through the strategic plan our vision and promise to prepare the next generation of leaders and working to solve the grand challenges of our time. We bring students to the table to do this.
So I think you're going to be hearing a lot more about this. I think the impact will be felt widely across our state. And I just want to thank this board for your support of all three of those initiatives that I talked about the importance that this university will play in securing our democracy, for continuing to stay true to who we say we are with our metrics and our strategic plan, both our own strategic plan, but the plan that the UNC system is grading us on. And then the commitment that we have to the state of North Carolina, and this is just the beginning of Carolina Cross 100. So thank you. So before I introduce our speakers for today, as Chair Bullock said, I want to introduce to you our interim Vice Chancellor for Research. I'd like to ask Dr. Penny Gordon-Larson to please stand. Penny is the Carla Smith Chamblee Distinguished Professor of Global Nutrition in the Gillings School of Global Public Health. And Penny, I want to thank you. You're an incredible leader. You have been in the Gillings School, but also working across disciplines. As we know from many of your colleagues, you've done that exceptionally well, and know that you're going to do an outstanding job in this interim role as our Vice Chancellor for Research. So I just wanted everybody to have an opportunity to say hello and thank you. So we have two outstanding presentations today that I'm really excited about, and we're going to start by introducing the initiative that's going to be led by faculty in our Department of Psychology and Neuroscience. But I'm going to just start by telling you a brief story, and that is that 3 years ago I had the opportunity to meet down in Miami with Dr. Jim Winston, a clinical psychologist, a Carolina alum, and I heard his growing concerns about the dangers of cell phones and social media on adolescents and teenagers. He's passionate about this. We talked about our own children and the ways in which we've been trying to keep that cell phone hidden from them, or in Jim's case, not even purchasing one for them. I think they maybe have a flip phone now, I understand. But we talked about partnering. He wanted to partner with his alma mater, your university, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and with our faculty experts, and to try to do something about this growing concern. We've come a long way in those 3 years, Jim. And on Tuesday, we announced a $10 million gift from the Winston Family Foundation to address the growing concern about the long-term effects of technology and social media use on teen social and emotional development. This gift will establish a new research center called the Winston National Center on Technology Use, Brain, and Psychological Development in the UNC's College of Arts and Sciences. The gift also establishes the first endowed professorship in the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience called the Winston Family Distinguished Professorship. And it provides seed funding to support 2 additional assistant professors at Carolina, an expanded research team, 2 data analysts, and additional staff members dedicated to strategic partnerships and educational outreach to parents and teachers. The Winston family has supported a wide variety of ventures at UNC-Chapel Hill for generations, and their attendance at the university can be traced back more than 150 years. The Winston Family Foundation includes James Winston Jr., class of 81 and 92 with his PhD. McKimmon Winston Mason, Bob Winston III, class of 84, Charles Winston Jr., and Franklin Beard. I'm also pleased that Jim, Bob, and Charles are with us today. So please stand. I'd like you to be recognized and thank them for this amazing commitment. Introduce the Carolina faculty who are leading this incredible program as co-directors. Mitch Prinstein is the Chief Science Officer of the American Psychological Association and the John Van Seters Distinguished Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience here at Carolina. And Dr. Ava Telzer is Associate Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience, and they're going to introduce the students joining them this morning and talk about this incredible opportunity. Mitch.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us. I'm excited to be here along with Dr. Eva Telzer. We are also very fortunate the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience at UNC's doctoral programs are ranked among the very best in the nation, and we have 3 of those doctoral students with us today. That's Maria Maza San Vicente, Cara Fox, and Nate Field. We're going to Thank you. As Chancellor Guskowitz mentioned, it was about 3 years ago when we were approached by and started having a fantastic partnership with the Winston Family Foundation, where we were interested in really understanding the growing and interesting issue that had started only about a decade or two before, and that was a substantial change in the context in which we get our information, in which we communicate, form, and maintain social relationships. That was, it seems like a very long time ago, but at the time, the data suggested that we had what might become an existential crisis. The number of youth and adults who were starting to use technology and specifically to engage in social media platforms was rising dramatically. Today, we have almost all adolescents within our country and internationally are interacting within social media platforms at remarkably high rates. And we'll show you some data about that in a second. We're interested in this for two reasons. One is because these platforms were not developed to optimize child development. So we unfortunately found that kids were interacting remarkably frequently on a platform that was built for profit. But second, we were particularly interested in what it is that kids are missing during the times that they're spending on social media. Some research suggests that kids are engaging in less activities, for instance, reading, at a proportional rate with the amount of time that they are spending on social media. There's also increasing data suggesting remarkable sleep deficits, which has substantial implications for brain development as a result of the amount of time the kids are spending on social media. We were hoping at the time that we can engage in some research and scholarship and educational initiatives to really shed light on this growing issue. But of course, things changed. During these last 3 years, we've had several forces. One, of course, is the very popular Social Dilemma documentary that was aired on Netflix and one of the most widely seen programs on that platform. The second, of course, is a whistleblower from Facebook talking about internal research demonstrating the potentially deleterious effects of social media use on adolescent girls' development. Of course, during this time, we also have experienced a worldwide pandemic where kids' interactions on technology and on social media have reached an all-time high. In these last 3 years, in partnership with and with support from the Winston Family Foundation, we have been able to build a team of Tar Heels who are very excited to become the next generation of top scholars and educators on this area, and several of whom are here today. And let me ask Maria to say a little bit more about that.
Hi, everybody. So one of the things that we realized when starting out doing this research was that when we were talking through adolescent social media use was that we were not the experts in the room. The best people to consult and to ask about how adolescents are using social media and why they're using it are the adolescents themselves. And so we reached out to a couple of schools and we formed a teen advisory panel that we meet with once a month to walk through the research process with us. From the very beginning of the research process, from formulating questions to designing methodology and questionnaires that are going to be appealing for teens, to checking in with our interpretations about the results and making sure that we are accurately depicting what they are doing and how they are doing it. And finally, to disseminating the results that we have within their own communities. Because at the end of the day, the research that we're doing is for the teens and for their parents and for the communities.
So as part of the 3-year initiative that we have been working on, we have established a curriculum, we have worked on dissemination, and we have worked hard on research. And we'll tell you about each of these quickly. So in terms of a curriculum, we developed a brand new course here at Carolina, Psych 180, called Social Media Technology in the Adolescent Brain. We've now taught the class across 4 semesters. There's been 6 sections and over 800 students who have enrolled in the class. Class enrollment maxed out within 5 minutes of enrollment opening up. Students were gravitating towards this class. It was a very popular class. We designed the class to be very unique. So there was active participation and engagement with very fun activities that really got them to think about their own use, as well as using science to help them to understand how technology and social media use may be affecting adolescents. In fact, the students were so passionate about the course that they took it to the next level and created their own student club, Students for Humane Technology. And so the class did not end at the end of the semester. They were passionate about continuing the work that they did in the class. I'm going to ask one of our teaching assistants, Nate, to tell you a little bit about one of the activities that we did in the class that really changed our students' perspectives.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Telzer. So a major goal in this class is to help students be mindful of their social media use, because we know there are potentially dire consequences associated with excessive social media use. And a way in which we do this is through an experiment. And what we do is we ask these students to stay off of social media for 24 hours, just something almost none of them have ever done, right? And what happens is we ask them to report back any changes in their mood. And they almost invariably say that they feel better, right? So they report potentially less anxiety. They feel more connected with people face to face. They get a little bit more sleep due to the neural consequences that Dr. Prinstein was talking about. And a lot of these students leave this class with permanent changes in how they view and interact with social media. So thank you.
The second aim of this initiative has really been on dissemination. In the true Carolina tradition, what we are doing in the lab and in the classroom, we are wanting to make available to the community in North Carolina at large. We have developed a website called teensandtech.org where we have put our course materials, summaries of the available research, and a variety of other resources on there, including a middle school curriculum that was developed by our colleagues in partnership with the Winston Family Foundation Initiative. And we're very excited now that those are available for folks to use so they can learn about the science of adolescent psychology and the brain and how that's related to social media use. Also, with the funds that were available to us, we were able to initiate a scholarly volume called the Handbook of Adolescent Digital Media Use and Mental Health. We were able to get international scholars to contribute to this volume. It will soon be available, and thanks to our resources, we are able to make this open access to anyone in the world to download. But perhaps most interesting, the timing of this handbook was pretty fortuitous. Summaries of this handbook were prepared in partnership with the American Psychological Association and distributed to all United States senators' offices, and now have been cited and formed the basis of at least 5 different bills that are currently emanating from the House and the US Senate to specifically address the harms in social media. That came directly from our scholarship here at UNC-Chapel Hill.
And one of the most exciting pieces of this initiative has been some of the research that we've got to do. So there has been a lot of focus on the negative effects of how technology and social media impacts adolescents, but the research has not kept up to it. And so with the generous funds from the Winston Family Foundation, we've been able to do some of the first cutting edge research with adolescents, following them longitudinally and collecting some objective measures of the way that they interact online to get a very solid understanding of how adolescents interact with their smartphones and technology and how this may be impacting their well-being over time. And so one aspect of collecting social media data is that people are not very accurate if you ask them, how often do you check your phone? How many hours a day are you on your phone? We need objective measures. And so what we did is we developed a protocol where we were able to get screenshots of teenagers' phone usage every single day across 2 weeks. So this is not just a one-time snapshot. We're getting 14 measures of their daily use of their time on their phone, their notifications, and other measures that we can get. And the benefit of this is that it's objective. We're not asking adolescents to subjectively kind of remember how much they use their phone. It's not retrospective, so you don't have to remember from past. We're getting 14 measures across 2 weeks, and we get thousands of data points because we have a couple hundred adolescents reporting this 14 times a day. So we get tons and tons of data. Now, this is a very busy slide, but what I want to draw your attention to is a couple of points. So every single one of those dots is is one teenager across the different days of the study. And if you look at this kind of top bar here, this is the number of times that they're picking up their phone every single day. And it's hard to see, but your y-axis there is the range of times that they're picking up their phones, and that ranges from 0 on the bottom up to 400 on the top. And so on average, adolescents are picking up and checking their phone 100 times a day. That's huge. Some teens at that very top level are even checking their phones 400 times a day. So teens are constantly looking at their phone, eager to see if they've gotten a text or a notification or a like on social media. This is a very prominent behavior that is kind of happening across their day. And you can see those data points there. If we look at the bottom bar there, this is their average time using their smartphone. And again, each little dot is one person, and our x-axis there is showing us the range. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but at the very bottom is 0, ranging all the way up to over 1,000 minutes a day. And our adolescents in this study are spending on average 500 minutes a day. So that's over 8 hours a day on their smartphones. And this ranges to over 1,000 minutes a day, which would be well over 16 hours a day. So teens that we've been studying are constantly on their phone, constantly checking their phone, and interacting on their smartphones kind of around the clock. Now you can imagine this could impact their peer relationships, their sense of belonging, the way that they interact with others, their feelings of well-being. And so what we can do is, because we have these data points on teenagers every single day across these days, we can ask the question, on a day where a teen checks their phone 50 times, do they feel worse than on a day where they check their phone only 2 times? Or on a day where they spend significantly more time on their phone, do they feel less socially connected to a day where they are on their phone for less time? And what we find is that basically social media makes teens feel more lonely. In the immediate hour after teens check their phone and log into social media, they feel more lonely, they feel less connected to their peers, and they crave more social interactions. So even though this phone that's supposedly connecting them to their peers should be maybe making them feel more positive in terms of those social connections, it's actually doing the opposite and making them feel more lonely and less connected. Now, perhaps the most exciting work that we've done is this longitudinal neuroimaging research, where we have followed teens longitudinally over time to find out how their behaviors online might be associated with developmental changes in the brain. So this is the very first study that has mapped brain development in adolescents across time to try to unpack how their behaviors online may be actually potentially changing the way that the brain functions. And so what we did is, when teens were in the 6th grade, we collected measures of how often they're checking their social media profiles. And then for 3 years after that, we scanned their brains as they process social rewards and threats to see if these online behaviors, these online checking behaviors, might be associated with changes in the way the brain is developing. And just very quickly, the takeaway message is that teens who are constantly checking their phones are showing long-term changes in brain development. They're showing alterations in brain regions responsible for regulation, so the ability to inhibit and stop behaviors and engage in cognitive control. They're showing alterations in regions involved in salience and reward processing. So these online checking behaviors may be increasing and causing this hyposensitivity to social rewards and punishment across time that is altering the way that the brain responds to its environment. So this is the very first preliminary evidence that potentially these online social behaviors that teens are engaging in is associated with the way that the brain is developing during a very important developmental period for the brain, when the brain is undergoing significant neural changes and setting the stage for lifelong maturation and development. And we're just getting started. I'm going to ask Cara here to tell you just a quick snapshot of some of the other research that we're doing, as well as I'll just put up here some of the other things that we're working on as well.
Yeah, so as Dr. Telzer told you about, these really innovative research methods are allowing us to look at social media experiences in more detail and more nuance. So kids are doing different stuff on social media. The individual differences that they have lead them to react to the same experience in different ways. And so we're starting to understand that experiences of digital stress, which would be anything that any stressful experience that's related to something unique to social media, those are related to long-term risk, maybe for increased risk for depressive symptoms, changes in friendship quality, and other things that we haven't gotten to explore yet. She spoke about some of the longitudinal brain scanning that we're getting to do. So getting to see how the brain changes over time. This is really exciting. In that same study where we're getting to see their social media use in the moment as they're sharing it with us, they're also wearing these Fitbits so that we're getting sleep data, information about heart rate, and then we're also getting information about their stress hormones. And so lots of biological variables, lots of ways that we're able to look at the ways that this is affecting them socially, biologically, neurally, a lot of really exciting work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any, Teresa Artesneo?
Yes, I'm curious, and I know this still may be an early stage. Do you anticipate at some point in time doing anything collaboratively with the Husband School? And I say this because we're talking about social media as if, you know, it's an entity devoid of people, but there are people making decisions about things. And I say this as a media professional. And it's, you know, a concern or at least interest I would have that as we create folks who are going to be the next generation of media professionals, that they have a sensitivity to these things, since they will become those in decision-making roles at some point in time.
Thank you for the question. Now with the launching of the center, we're looking for a variety of different partners, both within and outside the university. In fact, the funds will be available to allow us to make some seed grants to other departments on campus and establish some collaborations and consider different ways that we can expand this course and the curriculum to the Carolina community at large. Thanks.
So I had a question for the team, and it may go hand in glove with what Trustee Artesneo said. I was interested if you have or if there are any studies at our school or that you know of that relate to corporate and marketing companies' knowledge of these long-term trends, and the fact that, you know, if you have adolescents that on average, at least there, pick up their phone 100 times a day, is there any study on those long-term behaviors and corporate marketing companies' utilization or knowledge of that in reaching adolescents?
Yeah, this is one of the interesting issues in this area. So many of the scholars that get trained to study the effects of social media on adolescent development are actually recruited away to the companies that you're talking about, as well as tech companies. So one of the things that this center really makes possible is really so we can retain talent here, and we can make sure that we're having objective evaluations of the effects of social media. But there have been some data and some applications of the data to the groups that you're talking about as well. Do you want to say anything?
I think I had heard some of that during the congressional hearing with the whistleblower hearing on that she had been made aware of the utilization of that data by social media platforms. And have we been able to determine, or are there any studies that are looking into the ongoing mental health crisis across student populations at the university level, and maybe their adaptation of social media and the use of their phone prior to entering college?
Yeah, there has been a lot of research on that, but the research is really in its infancy. So to date, most researchers have been looking at the amount of time that people spend on social media as potentially the putative predictor of negative outcomes. Unfortunately, those results have been fairly equivocal. So what we're doing here now, which I think is going to introduce a new era of really understanding this, is specifically what are people doing when they're on social media, and what are the vulnerabilities they might have brought to the equation before they even logged on. What we're finding is that there are some individuals who engage their time reading news articles or connecting with friends. That might not be as bad as folks who are going on specifically to engage in social comparisons, or they're going on and they're being exposed to content that's overt discrimination, or actually content that's pretty popular online that teaches kids how to engage in dangerous or illegal behaviors covertly, including cutting behaviors or weight-related behaviors like anorexia or bulimic types of behaviors. Those are the kinds of things that we're starting to realize might be particularly concerning about kids' use of these platforms.
I know that Trustee Cotis had a question.
Well, thank you. This is very interesting. When I was raising my son, when he was younger, I used screen time. That gets to the amount of time you spend. I used it on myself as well because I found that I was spending a little too much time looking at my screen. But that's getting to the amount of time you spend. But to your point, it's about the content as well. And this desire, this craving for likes or craving to conform to achieve likes. And I think that's that part of that brain development that you're getting to. Are there additional tools beyond screen time that can help with those sorts of elements, either content or I don't know how you unwind that seeking approval out there or conforming as well?
Yeah, I don't think that there's tools developed for like parents to be able to monitor those types of behaviors online, but changing the social norms is one way. So right now, teens have a fundamental need to belong, a fundamental need to receive rewards. Oftentimes those come in the form of likes online. And so finding ways to change the peer norms around the use of social media platforms so that it's not expected that they should be connected to their phone nonstop checking for those likes. Right now it is a peer norm to have a phone, to be connected to a phone, and you'll be rejected by your peers if you're not engaging in those constant behaviors. Parents can push their kids as much as they can to not, but the peer culture is so strong. And so I think one really important place to put emphasis is working to change the peer culture around the use of these behaviors and that constant need to get rewards and check your phone and get more rewards that becomes this addictive pattern that is perhaps unstoppable over time.
I know Vice Chair Pryor has a question.
I've got a question for Dr. Winston, if he would indulge me. And thank you very much for your Family Foundation's gift. That's a remarkable thing and a lot of hotel rooms and restaurant meals, and thank you. I'm curious, the Chancellor referenced your family. What did you do with your children with social media?
So they don't have any, I think there's a danger of getting into the weeds because you realize the horror ahead of time. And I'm trying to set up a firewall, and I tell my 13-year-old, who has a flip phone, by the way, which was very hard to get. And
that was a tough negotiation.
It took me a month to find one, believe it or not. So he hates me for it, but I have this platitude of I care about your brain, not your image, which he rolls his eyes at. But you know, I think it's fairly common knowledge that the social media companies apply algorithms that are very addictive. Mm-hmm. They're designed to be that way. And kids are incapable. We wouldn't let our kids watch violence or take them to a gambling den or porn. It's the same sort of overstimulating effect. So I think personally that it's the phone, not just the social media. Mm-hmm. You can look at 100 times a day. That's an extraordinary amount. And understanding the adolescent brain development, I think it's important to try, and I'm not a Luddite, but I do want to protect that period of highway development, if you will. So I'm going to get my son a phone in 9th grade if I can manage the next year. But I really do feel like if kids start at 6 years old with a device, and this, I'm a clinician, not an academic, so I'm free to say this. I don't think at age 30 they will be neurobiologically capable of reading War and Peace, for example. Mm-hmm. I think the stimulation is going to destroy their capacity for critical thinking, for concentration. You're seeing that in schools already. Teachers are complaining about kids being incapable of sitting still. Distraction is such a difficult proposition. So what I'm hoping comes out of this is we can create neurobiological and scientific foundation to really start a social change movement, to be at the vanguard of that, to say sort of like with big tobacco, and we all thought this was great. Now we're realizing with more science and research that it's not such a good idea. And maybe we should start giving kids phones when they're 14, not 6, because the trend is really down when you see Instagram pushing to get a social media platform for 6-year-olds. To me, that's horrifying. And Mitch and Eve and I have talked about sort of the deliberate profits over people. And if they can hook users younger, then they've got a longer run. So I don't think that's all cynicism. I think there's some real credibility to that, but it's a heavy lift and it's a tough fight. My kids are the only ones in their grade that don't have a cell phone. The only ones.
Right.
So.
Well, I really enjoyed it. And I think this presentation confirms what a lot of us have suspected who have teenagers or children that, are in that young age of cell phones. And, we held out till 8th grade and we thought that we'd done a great thing. And now I'm thinking, I wish I'd held out longer. So thank you very much.
Trustee Meekins, did you have a question?
A few questions. Obviously, there's a lot of manifestations of physical issues that come from depression, anxiety, things of that nature. I'm sure your studies including that. What about the actual physical issues like visual issues, ocular migraines, things of that nature? Are you touching on that, number one? Number two, where does gaming come into play? Because it's not the cell phone, but a lot of these kids are, if they're doing 8 hours of phone, they're doing 4 or 5 hours of gaming, and they're interacting socially with that as well. And then third, how can you study, or are you going to study adults and how it's affecting us? Because we're doing it all as well. Everything I do, my wife is like, we don't read the newspaper anymore. We read Twitter for the news. So all three of those.
Yeah, there's some emerging research that's discussing the blue light that we're exposed to when we're looking at our screens, which may have an impact on melatonin and our sleep ability, as well as influence serotonin synthesis, which could affect things like depression or bipolar disorder, things like that. The third question about adults, yeah, it's affecting all of us too. Adults' brains are a little bit different, of course, than adolescents' brains in a few different ways. We have the ability to engage in more inhibitory behaviors to make sure that we're stopping ourselves. We may be a little bit more able to resist the temptation or the addictive properties. I will say that the UNC students in our classes over the last 6 sessions, we have asked them, now that they have learned the curriculum from our class, what their feelings have been about their parents letting them use their phones from the time that they were 11. And these young adults, 19, 20, 21, are saying, I wish my parents had not let me use the phone because now as an adult, I don't feel capable of meeting people without social anxiety, of sleeping, of concentrating. I wish my parents had kept me away for longer, is what they're telling us. And sorry, I forgot the second question.
Gaming included in the...
Gaming is, well, the center is 1 day old, but now we are very excited. But that is exactly what we're hoping to pursue as we now expand and initiate, because especially for, we see that more for adolescent males than for females, but it does have a social interaction component that is very much the same as what we're seeing on social media. And that's the focus that we want to include as we go forward. Thanks.
Trustee Bryan.
Thank you. This is just fascinating. It's creating some anxiety for me as I sit here a little bit. Thankfully, my oldest son, he didn't even want a phone, so we made him get an Instagram account when he went to college so he could actually, because everyone was on it, which is actually a little scary in and of itself. I'm really excited that you guys are doing this work. I hope you'll dig in on all these questions. I mean, obviously, we live in a free country. These things are going to be out there, but people understanding what's happening to your brains, and even just starting to question again, hey, let's put that down. Let's, interact in face to face. I mean, I'm sure COVID has harmed or has increased the problem from this due to the lack of sort of regular human interaction. I know there's some, I want to do some follow-up too, because I know there's some other groups I'm familiar with, because I'm familiar with kids on the gaming addiction side and the social accounts addiction side. And I'm kind of interested in how some of that study will end up sort of playing out as you guys, I mean, I really hope we'll do a good, I'm laughing because we're going to blast this out on social media, right? But, I just got to maybe pause there for a second thinking about that. But getting that information out, even just initially that what's happening, and I even went to the website immediately when you put it up to make, kids, they grow up really fast. And so, I mean, if parents don't start thinking about this immediately, it's another year their kid just sort of sitting in front of the phone. So really excited about your work. And I hope we start just really promoting the work just so people start asking questions. So thank you all.
Trustee Patel.
Yeah, I just want to say this is phenomenal. Father over 16 and a 20-year-old. Those numbers do make sense, but it's a double-edged sword. I think Dr. Winston, you said it very eloquently. Big tobacco. Tobacco was great. I mean, this is the long-term ramifications versus profit of corporate America is something. I mean, we have the ability now to get to the bottom of it a lot quicker than we were years ago. So thank you for what you're doing. And I think the ramifications of your results will be nothing but spectacular for kids coming in over here. So thank you.
Just one last thing.
One
last thing, and this is definitely just for lay level understanding, but the Wall Street Journal did a really good series on the impact of social media, particularly as it relates, in my opinion, to Instagram and teen girls. So if, most of you all have Wall Street Journal access, if you just Google to take a look at that series, what they do know about the impact to teen girls and still did things, anyway, it really is upsetting.
So to the Winston family, Jim and Bob and Charles, thank you. Bob, you want to come up and take the reins again? Are you interested in? Hey, I'm game if you're game. I got the ding donger here, okay? But we do want to thank you on behalf of the university and for all your service as a family to this university as well. Any other questions from the trustees? I would like to take maybe a 5-minute break before we hear from the collaboratory. So we'll be in recess for 5 minutes. Thank you. Like everybody else in the room, I'm wishing my 6th grader didn't have a smartphone. Good morning. Yeah, getting it back, right? All right. I'm going to turn it over to Chancellor Guskowitz.
Great. Thanks, Chair Bullock.
There we go.
Got a little feedback? We're good? We're good now? Okay, great. So it's my pleasure for our second presentation to introduce Dr. Jeff Warren, Executive Director of the North Carolina Policy Collaboratory. Jeff has spent the past 15 years in state-level science policy positions and earned his PhD from Carolina in our Department of Geological Sciences. And about 5.5 years ago, we brought Jeff home to Chapel Hill, and he's led the North Carolina Collaboratory, which marked its 5-year anniversary in February with some really impressive numbers and report that came out. It was featured in the Well about 3-4 weeks ago. And to date, the Collaboratory has or will fund more than 300 projects across all 17 UNC system schools. I'm not going to say anything more because I'm still your thunder. You're the star of this show. And it's received more than $145 million in legislative appropriations. And more than half of that came, I think, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, in this last session. So really appreciate all that you're doing. I know you're going to introduce some students that are part of your team, and we'll let you take it away.
Absolutely. Are there any questions? We're done. Thank you, Chancellor, Chairman Bolick, Vice Chair Pryor, member of the trustees. I am excited to be here today. It's been a long time coming. I usually come up before you about every 2 years, so we're off about 2.5 years. And I think our newest collaboration is going to be with that awesome group that just spoke to you right before us. And I walked up and talked to the team. I said, have you talked to any of the high school students over at School of Science and Math and School of the Arts? Because I think we need a collaboration. And collaboration has been mentioned no less than 10 times this morning. So that's what it's all about. So thank you, everybody, for teeing us up. Everybody talks about the policy collaboratory, but we are no more. This is the last time you'll see this logo and the last time you'll say policy. We have been rebranded by our legislature as the North Carolina Collaboratory. And we're very excited about that. We really are more of a research and development shop that impacts policy, and we still advise on policy, but it is not the mainstay of what we do. So the rebranding is great. And of course, our wonderful graphics folks here at UNC set us up with a great new logo. It's nice to step back and see how this began, because everything is smooth sailing right now. But let's step back 5.5 years and remember that this model faced a lot of skepticism, a lot of uphill battles, and we were really born in a crucible of fire. And Dwayne Powell will always be one of my favorite editorial cartoonists. May he rest in peace. But as soon as this showed up, and then I knew I was going to come over to the collaboratory a few months later, I asked him for a reprint of this to hang in the collaboratory. And he said, well, thank you for having a sense of humor. I said, well, without a sense of humor, we can't get anything done. So here is Dwayne Powell lampooning the creation of the collaboratory, but yet at the bottom of the piece of art that he signed for me, best of luck with this project. I do think something good will come from it. There's a lesson here that even in the midst of all the skepticism, that there were a lot of true believers out there. And there were some early adopters of this, including Chancellor Guskowitz when he was Dean of Arts and Science, Dean Barbara Reimer over the Gilling School, our advisory panel, Al Seegers, who's the chair of our panel, really came out as early adopters and had to spread the word. And as time went by, more and more people started to say, well, you know what, maybe this just isn't some Republican ruse to bastardize science. And we worked really hard to make sure the academic integrity is there, because that's what this institution stands for, this entire campus. We were lucky enough last year to get a publication out in Issues in Science and Technology called Science for Hyperpartisan Times. And this really is the full story of how the collaboratory came about. And I urge you all to go and Google this and find it online. I forgot to bring some extra copies of the journal today that were provided free of the publisher, no taxpayer funds. But this article also spurred me and motivated me to make a pitch to our College of Arts and Sciences. And starting next semester in the spring, I will be team teaching an undergraduate course called Science for Hyperpartisan Times. And I can't think of any better time than to get into the weeds on this issue and let people know that discourse is good. It's healthy. It just needs to be undergirded with respect and understanding. And I think Trustee Richards also echoed those sentiments this morning with his remarks. So thank you. So yeah, Dr. Molly Worthen from history and Dr. Christian Lundberg from communications. The three of us, three totally different backgrounds, will be teaching 300 undergraduates starting next semester. So very excited for that. The Chancellor went over our appropriations, and this is shocking every time I look at this and think about this. Half of our appropriations totally, which is $145 million since the creation of the collaboratory in 2016. And these are dollars that were not otherwise coming to the university or the UNC system. These are new dollars. These were not supplanted dollars. But I will say half of this is federal, related to COVID. About 75 million of our dollars is COVID related. So that's for obvious reasons. And I've drawn almost comically, but even maybe hopefully, this dash line here in our upcoming fiscal year 22-23, because I've already been in talks with many of our legislative leaders about the opportunities we have for transformational research. We're slowly turning the tide on the discussions between legislative leaders and academics. They now understand that real research takes time. It can't be flipped around in a 4 to 6 month study with a state agency. It takes 2 to 3 years. It takes money. And with that money, it also takes non-reversion clauses so we can carry that money forward and fund the research. And these have been
These have been battles, but we're starting to turn the ship. As Provost Clemens likes to say, we turn the ship about 3 degrees and we'll eventually get to the waypoint. We can't turn it 180. But it's also important to remember with this success story and all the things that we have cooking in the oven right now, there are 2 people in this room that actually predate my arrival on the collaboratory. So Steve Wall is in the back, raise your hand. And Lori Farah is sitting down, raise your hand. Steve is our outreach director and we share him with Institute of the Environment. And Lori has been our accounting and budget maven since the inception. And so a lot of people like to come up to me and say, I can't believe what you've done with the collaboratory, but it's also been them. It's a whole team, in fact, and you're gonna meet some great students of ours, our army of incredible interns. But the support across the university has been overwhelmingly positive, from the chancellor to the provost to the board of trustees, to Nate Knuffman, to President Peter Hans, to the board of governors. I also have to say Clayton Summers, I've got to give him a shout out. We were joined at the hip and he was very successful in helping work the House while I worked the Senate. Okay, we divided and conquered. And Chris McClure and I spend lots of time discussing strategies and ideas together. So we keep that going. But all the services here at the university, and I will certainly miss a few, but I just want to let you know how broad the support is. Carly Perrin at the Service Center of Excellence, Bo Jimerson at Purchasing. I mean, Bo and his team were instrumental in rapidly helping us purchase 64 -80 freezers a year and a half ago to store vaccines for the state. That may not sound like a lot of freezers, but it's actually enough to hold 1.8 million 2 milliliter vials of vaccine. And if you do the math, you have about 5 doses in each vial. So those freezers actually had enough vaccine for every single person in the state. Cheryl Stout at Parking, Anna Wu and her team at Facilities, Gordon Merkline at Real Estate and Energy, Steve D'Agostini on the budget, Henry Price at the Budget Office. Let me tell you, Henry Price is one of my favorite people on campus. Michelle Bolus at Innovate Carolina, right here in the front, our Chief Innovation Officer. Charles Marshall's team over in legal, Tammy Bouchel, Michael Maloof. I mean, it really has taken a village to get this off the ground, and I would be remiss if I did not mention that. Let's talk about some of the budget highlights really quick so we can keep it moving. Out of our $76.76 million in the November budget, there's $20 million for a wastewater pilot program. We're working with the School of Government, $15 million for COVID-related industry and academic partnership grants, $15 million for additional academic COVID-related research. A lot of this will build on the COVID research that we did with the $29 million and then another $15 million. When you hear the numbers about sequencing the variants across the state, it's our 12-body partnership, the Corviseq program that's working with DHHS that are giving you those numbers. A lot of those sequences are happening right here at Chapel Hill in Dirk Dittmer's lab. We've got $14.25 million for PFAS research for polyfluoroalkyl substances, Gen X just being one of more than 10,000 PFAS, and certainly you've heard about Gen X in the news. And 10 of that we'll talk about a little later for our very exciting resin project. $5 million for an algal bloom pilot project, $1 million new recurring dollars. So you know how exciting it is to get non-recurring money. It's even more exciting to get recurring dollars for research. So we already had $1 million recurring. Now we've got another $1 million recurring, another $500,000 recurring for a historically minority serving institution grant program with our 6 HMSI campuses. And I've been walking hand in hand with Reggie Holly, Sonia Nichols, Joel Ford, prior to that, Daryl Allison with the Board of Governors. Does that number need to be higher? Absolutely. But we've got to show we can do good things with that amount before we can go ask for more. At the very least, I would like it to be easily divisible by 6. I'll let y'all do the math there. There's 6 campuses. Okay. $600,000 to continue our Ferrymon and Monmon project that UNC's been running for over 2 decades. And those are sensors that are on our ferry routes across the Pamlico Sound. A great partnership with DOT. DEQ, we got an additional $750,000 for our Falls Lake, Jordan Lake nutrient management efforts. We're about to enter the 7th year of nutrient management studies in 2 critical lakes to the Triangle area. And then, subject to your approval,
The budget you're going to consider this afternoon on a vote, the Chancellor and Nate Knuffman, we've been working together. In that, there's a line item to provide $900,000 annually in operations to the collaboratory. The message that we can send back to the legislature is now every dollar you send us from the General Assembly goes to research. UNC is now going to cover the back office functions, and I am grateful for your support on that. It's a great message to send back to Jones Street. Some other highlights of this budget, because a budget always has more than fiscal numbers in there. We were codified. We are now Article 31 of General Statute 116-255. The collaboratory is in the green books. It's no longer random session laws spread out across the past 5 years. And in that is expanded authorizations and an expanded fairway for what we can do. We can manage other projects outside of environmental and natural resources. Obviously, we've been in the public health space almost 3 years with COVID. We now are compelled and will continue to support research projects at our 6 historically minority serving institutions. We can now identify and pursue R&D partnerships between academia and government agencies, nonprofits, private and publics. We are now to maintain an online reporting portal for firefighting foam. Most of that contains PFAS, and we're working with the Office of the State Fire Marshal. And we're also authorized to teach and train students and faculty to engage in and administer neutral and unbiased research and science policy advice. That's very, very close to my heart. We need more scientists and non-scientists in the mix to have these discussions and understand the process. Because it is sausage making. We are now system-wide. We have projects on every campus in the UNC system. And let me tell you, we had to put our thinking caps on. And School of the Arts is yellow in this map because we're waiting for one signature. But it's a really cool project with their Media and Emerging Technology Lab. And they are partnering with Winston-Salem State Nursing School. And they're going to be developing a virtual training environment to help prepare the nursing students for their annual nursing license exam. Very excited to see if we can export that to, say, UNC Pembroke. Very excited to see how good that might be to go to some of our gaming partners that call North Carolina home, such as Epic and others that have the Unreal Engine. And I think there's a partnership there that's just waiting to be launched. And then we've got a great STEM project looking at students at School of Science and Math. And I do think that we're about to engage some of our high school students in some screen time research at both School of the Arts and Science and Math. We've got new personnel. So for the first 5 years, I was the only full-time employee. The reason I did that is fiscal conservancy, because every dollar we spent on operations was a dollar we couldn't spend to research. And the research was more important than the operations. But we got to a point, especially with the large amount of funding we got in November, that we had to finally bite the bullet and hire more folks. And I want to thank UNC-HR for expediting these. And Lori Farah is now full-time with us as our financial analyst. And so she's already stood up and waved. But Dr. Greer Arthur, we poached her from NC State. She's our new research director. She's 6 weeks old at UNC. And I believe she likes Carolina blue better than Wolfpack red. And Sarah Fitzgerald, she's got the press badge on. She's our communications director, and she started on Monday. And we are delighted to have her to handle all of our communications moving forward. So, and we have one more position that we're going to look to fill to handle business functions. Some other exciting things is now that we actually have a staff, we need a space. So we will be living on the 9th floor of Keenan Laboratories starting this fall. We are already in talks on how that space is going to be built out. And I got to say that it's very important when people come to campus, such as our trustees, although I know you have these really cool parking passes already, but our legislators, friends from other campuses, members of the Board of Governors, we now have a parking space right there by Genome Science that is ours. So hats off to Cheryl Stout, who actually probably is the most powerful person on campus. So come and see us. We've got a parking spot. And now I want to pause a little bit. Steve Wall has, not only is he overseeing outreach with our stakeholders in the Falls and Jordan project, but he's overseen our internship program that was started in 2019, This has included 30 undergrad and graduate students, and we just gave them all raises this year. So when you're an intern with us or a research assistant, as an undergrad, you make $15 an hour. As a master's student, you make 17.5. As a PhD student, you make $20 an hour. And I know the students appreciate that because I remembered how much I appreciated wages when I was in college. So I'd like to take a pause and invite our graduate and undergraduates to come up, take a few minutes at the mic, give their name, where they're from, what they're studying, and what year they are. And they are tremendous.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Lucy Gray, and I'm a senior from Boone, North Carolina. I am a statistics and analytics major. And for the policy collaboratory this semester, I've been working on using GIS software to create a map of floodplain resiliency projects in the state of North Carolina in order to support the collaboratory's flood resiliency study.
Good morning. My name is Sasha Medina, and I'm a graduate student from Wilmington, North Carolina. I study strategic communication at UNC-Hussman with a focus in science communication. And at the collaboratory, I'm a communications intern, and I help with the communications efforts, most recently a podcast series. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Christian Chong, and I am a sophomore from Waxhaw, North Carolina. I study biology and public policy, and at the collaboratory, I am an environmental policy intern as well as an undergraduate assistant to the Cornell Research Lab, and I work with the PFAS resin project. So.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Fitzgerald, and I am a second-year graduate student at the Hussman School studying strategic communications. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina, and I work alongside Sasha doing communications work for the collaboratory. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amina Hester. I'm an environmental policy intern here with the collaboratory, and I'm working on the flood resiliency project, specifically environmental justice concerns related to it. I'm a junior here, and I'm studying public policy and environmental justice and data science. Thank you all.
Good morning. My name is Sierra Foster, and I'm a junior from Mocksville, North Carolina. I'm majoring in chemistry and neuroscience, and within the collaboratory, I'm an intern that works with the Leaf-Barth Lab in order to create their PFAS resin. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Georgia Morgan. I am a senior from Apex, North Carolina, and I study public policy and urban planning. With the policy collaboratory, I've been working on the Falls Lake nutrient management study and within renewable energy policies in the state. Thanks so much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elijah Gullett. I'm a senior from Lexington, North Carolina, studying public policy and urban planning. I'm working with the collaboratory in the Gillings School of Public Health, researching and creating a priority list of North Carolina communities for clean drinking water and wastewater infrastructure investments. Thank you.
Hey y'all, I'm Janice Arojado. I'm a senior from Concord, North Carolina, majoring in environmental science and geography. And with the collaboratory, I've been doing a lot of work with Falls Lake and studying nutrient management practices.
Good morning. My name is Allie Adams, and I'm a senior from Beaumont, North Carolina. I'm studying political science, and for the collaboratory, I'm doing research on PFAS issues on the state and federal level. Thank you, guys.
Good morning. I'm Monica Cardoso. I'm a freshman from Cary, North Carolina. I'm studying biology, and with the collaboratory, I just started on a project with Dr. Fisher looking at the short-term and long-term outcomes of COVID-19 patients. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gabrielle Schust. I am a second-year student in the MPH program at Gillings. I'm originally from Columbia, Missouri, and as the graduate research assistant for the collaboratory, I have been working on kind of doing some internal infrastructure building and doing a lot of background research for potential projects and literature reviews. And I am part of the reason that I've decided to stay here and attend law school in the fall is the collaboratory. And I just want to say that it's a really special organization that brings a lot of value to our campus and to our state.
Thank you to all of our students. Thank you. The future's going to be okay, folks. We're going to be okay. So real quick, we got 3 different influxes of COVID dollars totaling $74 million. Our first was $29 million in 1920, and that was over 90 projects across 15 different campuses in the system. We got $15 million in 2021 to stand up the Corviseq project. So that's the coronavirus variant sequencing network. That is over 64 hospitals that are participating in that. So for the most part, if you've had a positive sample, it's being sequenced either here at Duke, at NC State, at UNC Charlotte, or at East Carolina. And then we just got $30 million in the November budget, and that'll be split evenly between academic research and then corporate academic partnerships. And let me tell you what's going to be cool about this new round of money. We're going to take about $6 million, as Monica mentioned, and Dr. Fisher and his team over at the med school. We are going to do a very long longitudinal study on vaccine and natural immunity and the role of therapeutics. It's an area that I've got a lot of questions from legislators. It's an area that we don't really have much research in, so we're going to answer the question. I don't care what the data say. I just want to know what the data say. So we're about to find that out. And then the other 7 million or so, we'll do some other discretionary projects here, but we're going to be doing a statewide initiative partnering with the Department of Public Instruction and our Opportunity Scholarship Program with the UNC system. And we're going to be looking at learning lag across the state related to the pandemic. And a lot of that money is going to go out the door to our minority campuses, and not just to study it, but to go ahead and start mitigation clinics for reading clinics and writing clinics and math clinics, because we could study this for the next 10 years. We got to fix it, and we got to fix it quick. So we're going to hope to be part of that solution. Here were some highlights of what we did in the first $29 million. I won't read everything. This was all phase 1. Exciting technologies came out of this, including Barrick's lab has the next generation COVID vaccine that was funded by us. We helped stand up the READY project. It was so successful in the beginning, those first 6 projects, that it received an additional standalone $18 million from the legislature in November. So it's very exciting. There are many other technologies that have either been licensed or in phase 1, 2, or 3 trials. And it was just exciting to be part of that. We continue to expand our reach with state agencies, DEQ, AG, DHHS, emergency management. Very excited. We're having conversations with the Office of the Courts. I feel like my voice is changing now. The Office of the Courts project is going to look at court modernization and will actually let us plant flags in all 3 branches of state government, which is an important milestone for us. We've heard about the resin before, right? I held up the white powder in the vial. That was Frank Livefarth, Orlando Cornell. It's been widely publicized. It's been widely studied. I think we now have 2 patents under our belt on this. It excited the legislature enough that they gave another $10 million in angel investment fund to go ahead and expand this project and scale it up and deploy it. Because as the discussion went with the legislators is, well, what's it going to take now to scale it up? Well, it's going to take money. So we could either go to outside sources and give away a piece of the ownership, or we could hold on to the ownership and we could actually split some of the profits with the general fund in the legislature. And they went for it. And there was some skepticism on campus because it's a new funding distribution model off of patent revenue. But when I talked to Michelle's team at Innovate, I said, when's the last time you could remember that the legislature sent us angel investment funds? And they couldn't remember. So I said, so this is actually a good thing. Let's roll with this and see where we can go. So you hear Frank Livefarth a lot, but you don't hear as much about Orlando Cornell, but they are partners in crime. So Orlando is an environmental science and engineering over at Gillings, and they are joined at the hip on this project. I like to call it the Wonder Resin Project, but I don't think we've actually named it yet. We are lucky enough to have the support of Dean Reimer and Gillings. The space in Beatty Hall has been turned over to us for this project to go ahead and manufacture the resin and have the lab support for it. And so this is where the facilities teams come into place. And with the legislature, I've got to thank them again, because we had some purchasing exemptions that we could invoke to expedite purchasing, especially when we're dealing with emerging issues, concerns to public health, safety, and welfare, where the research had to get out of the gate yesterday. We've also got some construction exemptions that will help fast track projects to support our research. And so we're going to be moving very quickly forward on the Beatty Hall renovation. And I just want to remind everybody that clean water does begin at the old well. So I'm going to trademark that, I think, myself. But really, what's next here at the tail end before I open it up for questions? We're going to have a continued commitment to our partnerships with our minority campuses, and a very real partnership with money behind it, and have them at the table at the beginning and not as afterthoughts. We are about to fund a potential leukemia vaccine treatment at the School of Pharmacy. We're about to fund an ocular melanoma treatment. If any of you are familiar with the potential ocular melanoma cluster in Iredell County, this is something that's very real, impacting our citizens. Numerous projects in PFAS and COVID. We've got a meeting with Honeywell, now proudly Charlotte-based North Carolina home, to talk about some of their hydrofluoroolefins, HFOs, that are refrigerant replacements. And we're connecting them with some of our atmospheric chemists, and looking at a potential collaboration with private industry. We're talking about a citizen science project with all 170 of our legislators around radon. That could be an actual extremely interesting project. We've got 3 more projects on oysters. You know, I've got no shortage of great ideas that come to me. So people say, why don't you ever do requests for proposals? Because we're bombarded all the time, and it's wonderful. I picked up the phone with Rachel Noble down at the coast at our Marine campus. Jeff, did you realize that some of our oyster leases lost 90% of their oysters last year? I said, what's the cause? She goes, we don't know. We've been taking tissue samples. We're trying to figure it out. She goes, and these are not new people that got in the game that are only 1 or 2 years old. These are decade-old oyster farmers. I said, and this could absolutely impact our economy, our industry, our water quality. And so we're going to stand up a $300,000 project to look at that, and some other oyster research as well. We've got a lot of infrastructure projects potentially in the hopper. We just received a legislative request yesterday to develop a plan for a salt marsh mapping and monitoring and restoration network. So the model is working. It's very exciting to be here, to be able to run this model. But again, I don't really run it. I'm the one that gets to talk, but it's all those folks out there, the students and my other team. It's the faculty, it's the leadership of this university, it's the leadership of the system. And it's the folks on Jones Street that we may not always agree with, but they got behind this early, and they've continued to support it. And there's no other state that has this model. I kind of like to keep it that way. So with that, thank you for your time.
Dr. Warren, thank you. And as you know, I'm a huge fan. We did pass the budget already. We did it by consent. So you're good on your line item.
See what happens when I'm on my screen when that happens in the meeting? So thank you for the 900,000 in operations.
So do we have any questions from Trustee Jones?
Tremendous work. I mean, you and I have spoken quite a bit about the collaboratory. Can you give just a brief synopsis of where we are with the learning loss, learning lag program that's, or the research that's gone on with regards to that?
Well, so I've got to give a hats off to the DPI in creating the Learning Loss Office a year ago. And anybody you talk in this space is going to call it something different. There's learning loss, there's learning lag, there's unfinished learning. Whatever it is, it's a problem. So DPI has been instrumental in doing a lot of projects already. We funded a team at Fayetteville State and here at Chapel Hill about 9 months ago to do some learning loss work. And one of the items that came out of a meeting we had with Thad Domini here at our School of Education was, virtual learning didn't work. And we can see that in the data. And it's all we could do at the time, but it didn't work, and there's a lesson learned there. So we are going to help supplement the needs of the state and be issuing some RFPs to get to areas that they need the answers for, because there's so much data. But we're also going to be doing some things kind of apart from them. One will be digging into this opportunity scholarship data. So that's a very interesting data set when you think about the population there. Students that left the public school system to go to the private school system. So how do they perform, compared to their peers? We've got another project, a sub-project of that. We'd like to see where we are with the expenditure of the funds. Our school system has received an enormous amount of funds. So are they being spent wisely? What's the most effective spending routes for that? Because the money is going to keep coming. So if we can help guide that. But to really get to your question, I mean, the research is still ongoing. We've learned a lot early on. I think I remember DPI saying that, interestingly, public school kids that had IEPs did better than their peers. So there's something there. And that was a partnership they did with SAS that did the analytics on those data. So I really think the next year is going to be critical. And I think there are going to be a lot of programs that we can stand up to actually start to have the mitigation measures in place, the hyper tutoring, the after school camps, the summer camps to help bridge this. But I really can't speak much more than that because we're just getting started, at least at the collaboratory.
Any other trustees with questions? Vice Chair Pryor.
Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Warren. Just to reference something you said at the beginning, and I see Steve Wall back there standing, and I've known Steve for a long time, longer than I've known Dr. Warren, and your work on the collaboratory and the respect that you have among folks, not only here, but in Raleigh, I think has been instrumental in the success of the collaboratory. And there's an interesting parallel there for other things on this campus where we want to stand up things that foster real debate, and there are two sides presented, and your focus on science, regardless of what, who gets offended, but the science is going to win in the end, I think is a great lesson for other endeavors on the campus. So thank you for what you're doing.
The comment that I made to Senator Berger on my way out the door was, don't think of it as losing one science advisor, thinking of it as gaining hundreds.
Trustee Cotis.
Ken, I also appreciate your work here as a developer. That's a friend of Senator Berger, so maybe I'm depicted in that cartoon as well. But, I worked in 1997 to develop one of the first private constructed wetlands. And at that time, I faced a lot of resistance from the city of Greensboro. And later they came back to study it. And I think that's what we're seeing right now is there's this initial resistance and people perceiving or attributing some sort of nefarious reasoning behind the formation of something. But in the end, when they get past that and start looking at the actual work that's been completed, they understand that this is an effort to find win-win solutions out there to accommodate investment and jobs with better technologies and solutions, and being more innovative and finding new solutions instead of just saying, this is the way it is the way it's always been, these are the regs, looking at other options as well. So again, I really applaud your work, and it's glad to see that people are starting to appreciate it as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions from trustees? I had the opportunity to hear from Arthur Blank earlier this week, and one of the comments that he made about his corporation and Home Depot and their success was not just innovate, but innovate continuously. And I think that's what the collaboratory is doing. So I'm a fan, as you know, and I really appreciate all your work. Thank you, Dr. Warren.
Thank you, Chairman.
I have one quick question, and we talk often, Jeff, in great presentation about what is it that sort of distinguishes Carolina. What is unique here? What is the world turning to us to solve? I think it's a great example. How unique is it? Are there other anything else across the country that has brought together something like this? I'm just curious.
No.
Okay.
No. I will say this week we had a long discussion, hour-long, Dr. Arthur and I, with a woman from Maryland who is leading staff person of the Maryland Black Caucus. And she was very excited about the opportunities in Maryland. but said, oh my gosh, it almost seems overwhelming on how that happened. I said, well, we can happily guide you along. So my comment about I want to be the only collaboratory in the United States is tongue in cheek, because if we can export this model to every other state's going to be stronger and the nation will be stronger as a whole. So do understand that. But I do like to be unique in the fact that we were the first, and we've kind of shown the effectiveness. And I will say, for so many years, people have focused on federal science policy because that's where the billions of dollars are. But if you watch how slowly things, if at all, through Congress, besides the funding, but the policy itself, it's easier to change state level policy. And it's easier to change state level policy when the data are coming from the state sponsored institutions. So this is a very real way to be nimble in our research. You know, we get money out the door within a week and stand these projects up pretty darn quick, because we like to help influence the debate going on down on Jones Street. Now, certainly do we care about Capitol Hill? Yes, but we're beholden to making the state a better place. And every time I hear the chancellor, he always echoes this, and I try to do it as well, that this is the university of the people, and we are proudly public, but we are here to service everybody in the state. And that's why when we curate these projects, we make sure that there is a deliverable to make lives better across the state. So it's honestly, people have asked, what's your average day like? I'm like, there is no average day, but that's what I like about the job, and getting to actually spend money on these amazing researchers. And 75% of our funds have stayed here at Carolina. That just happened. That was happenstance when we started to look back through the numbers. And I panicked for a little bit, saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to get yanked in front of the legislature, and somebody's going to be an NC State grad, or somebody's going to be a UNC-Asheville grad, and they're going to say, why is so much going to Carolina? And then it dawned on me, well, interestingly, 75% is the total amount of external funding brought into the system by Carolina. So it actually just came together perfectly as a ratio. Ours happened by happenstance, but it makes sense.
Dr. Warren, I did have one question from Trustee White, who is by Zoom. She was unable to appear. She did want to know how the collaboratory is working with Anita Brown Graham and the Carolina Across 100.
Well, the good news is I was also appointed to the committee that helps oversee that project, and Anita Brown Graham is on our advisory board, as is Mark Little, who is very much involved with Anita and Carolina Cross 100. We talk about it a lot. We are about to push out probably $150,000 to assist that program and do some more research really about getting our folks back to work and rebuilding our economy after the last 2 years.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. Appreciate it. And your students don't really appreciate you coming, because it is about you, and we want you to know that. But don't feel like you have to stay for the rest of the meeting. I know you got other great things to do, and I'm sure Jeff's got some things for you to do. So feel free to leave at this time if you want to. If you want to stay, you're certainly welcome, but I don't want you to be embarrassed about leaving. Trustee Cotis, I'm going to call on you for a report from the Audit, Compliance, and Risk Management Committee. You may want to give them just a minute.
This report covers items discussed during the second meeting of the Committee on Audit, Compliance, and Risk Management yesterday. The committee voted to approve the Audit, Compliance, and Risk Management Committee charter that details the committee's oversight responsibilities and operating procedures, as well as proposed amendments to the Office of Internal Audit Charter. The committee charter and amended internal audit charter are available on Board Effect. So this is an action item. So on behalf of the committee, I move that the Board of Trustees vote to approve the Audit, Compliance and Risk Management Committee Charter and the proposed amendments to the Office of Internal Audit Charter.
I have a motion from trustee Codis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second from Vice Chair Pryor. All those in favor, is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
I think we have to.
Oh, yeah, I think we do have to do a roll call because trustee White is via Zoom. So, Mr. Secretary, if you would do the roll, please.
Ms. Otter-Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Bryan? Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Codis?
Yes.
Mr. McCullen? Mr. Meekins?
Yes.
Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Mr. Pryor?
Yes.
Mr. Richards? I am a yes. Mrs. White?
Yes.
Chairman Bullock?
Yes. Thank you.
So the committee also received an update from the Office of Internal Audit on recent information technology initiatives, as well as a cybersecurity update from the university's Vice Chancellor for Information Technology and Chief Information Officer. Vice Chair Turner and I also received a legal briefing that will be addressed during our closed session. Lastly, Chair Bullock and I have discussed some recent events that will likely require additional information in an effort to improve transparency. That kind of delves into full compensation information rather than just base salary info. Dan Kane had first alerted us to this issue a few months back, but recent events have shown that we need further transparency on that. And all positions held by employees of the university to better understand workload and conflicts of commitment, as well as conflicts of interest, and checking into reporting structures to ensure checks and balances. We'll be discussing this further with Chancellor Guskowitz and Dean Weber. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This concludes my remarks.
Thank you, trustee Codis. I'll now turn the floor over to Vice Chair John Pryor, who chairs the Budget, Finance, and Infrastructure Committee.
Thank you, Chairman Bullock. My report covers items discussed during the Committee on Budget, Finance, and Infrastructure yesterday, March 23rd. The committee reviewed and voted to approve the all funds budget prepared by the Chancellor and his staff. The board approved this budget as part of its consent agenda earlier this morning, and it will be presented to the Board of Governors at its May meeting. The committee also considered and approved several advanced planning spending authority requests, designer selection requests, and site approvals. Detailed information about each request is available on Board Effect. Finally, the committee also considered and approved a property acquisition for the Nutrition Research Institute and a property acquisition by lease for the UNC Innovation Hub. All of these items were approved by the board as part of the consent agenda this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Pryor. I'll now turn the floor over to trustee Allie Ray McCullen, Chair of the External Relations Committee. Trustee McCullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday, this report covers items discussed yesterday during the Committee on External Relations. The committee received an annual update from WNC Public Radio by Beth Keith, Associate Vice Chancellor for Communications. The committee also received a development update from Vice Chancellor for Development David Ruth, as well as a legislative update from Chris McClure, Senior Advisor to the Chancellor, and Kelly Dockham, Director of Federal Affairs. This concludes my report. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you missed my report.
I did not. I heard it. I read the sign. I was checking with legal to make sure you were all up and up there, Trustee McCullen, and you are. I got a full report that you were on the up and up. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. And we will deal with some external relations matters in closed session that are appropriate for that. I'll now turn the floor over. Well, I don't need to. Trustee Bryan, you'll give a report from University Affairs at the end of the meeting following closed session. So I'll now go to Secretary Turner for a motion. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got. Perrin, I'm sorry about that. I'm chomping at the bit here to move along. So. Yeah, it wasn't highlighted. That's true. It was not highlighted in yellow. All right, Trustee Jones, I turn the floor to you, sir.
Maybe we should get light blue highlighters. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Bullock and Board of Trustees members, this report covers items discussed during the meeting of the Committee on Strategic Initiatives yesterday, March 23rd. During our meeting, the committee received a presentation from Tierney Bates, Executive Director of University Career Services, Dana Simpson, Chair of the UNC-GAA Board of Directors, Doug Dibbert, President of the GAA, and Marcy Leemore, Director of Enrichment Programs at the General Alumni Association. This presentation provided information regarding the university's career services program and the important ways in which this program works with the General Alumni Association to support our students in their career endeavors. There were no items for action by the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This concludes.
So not as a makeup, I would have done this anyway, but I do want to thank you for your leadership on 2 points. One is the focus on leadership at the university and making sure that every student on campus has the opportunity for education related to leadership. I want to thank you also, Trustee Richards, for your focus on that as well, and your focus on career services, because I know when we talked, when you first came on the board, those were two very important prongs that you wanted to attack as a member of the board. And so I want to thank you for that. I think we're really moving in the right direction on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, I will turn it over to Secretary Turner. Before I do, though, I do want to make one note to the closed session agenda. I think it is important. I did this. One of the things I did check with legal. There is a notation that the board will go into executive session. And I want to articulate exactly what that means and why we're going into executive session. We will go into executive session to discuss the form and procedure for the biennial evaluation of the chancellor. That evaluation will not occur in executive session. There is a procedure that is prescribed by the UNC system office as to how that is conducted. I have met with the central office on the details of that. And during executive session, I will share those details with members of the Board of Trustees, and we'll move forward with that evaluation. So that is the stated purpose of the executive session. So in full transparency. So Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board convene in closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute Section 143-318.11 A1 to prevent the disclosure of privileged information under Section 126-22 and also pursuant to Section 143-318.11 A2, A3, A5, A6, and A7.
Do I have a second to that motion? I have a second from Trustee Patel. Mr. Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bryan?
Yes.
Mr. Davis? Yes. Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Codis?
Yes.
Mr. McCullen? Mr. Meekins?
Yes.
Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Mr. Pryor?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Mrs. White?
Yes.
Chairman Bullock?
Yes. We're in closed session. And in closed session, we will begin with the external relations report, move to university affairs, go to a legal update, deal with a student appeal matter, and then executive. Okay, great. We're going to be back in order. We have had a motion, a second, and we are back to open session. We have
the committee voted to approve amendments that do two. First amendment does two things. or the resolution does two things. Creates a personnel committee as a delegated committee of the board with authority to make tier 2 appointments and assistant athletic coach appointments exceeding 250,000. It also delegates authority to the chancellor to make assistant athletic coach appointments not exceeding 250,000. So on behalf of the committee, I move the Board of Trustees vote to approve the proposed amendments to the bylaws and the resolution in your materials.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Right. In addition to that, do we have to, I have to
Yes,
appoint?
and I can actually, I'm going to make a motion to approve new members of the newly created personnel committee. I would move that we approve Chair Bullock, Trustee White, who's thankfully for her, maybe not on the phone right now, and myself to that committee.
I would second that motion. Any additional discussion of that? All those in favor say aye. 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 She's not, but she knows about it.
She doesn't know about it. It's fine.
We don't. That's why I had her go off. That's why I had her go off.
I was going to take myself out and put
She was
Sharon
fine.
on, but I
She had
just.
something to do.
We also approved a resolution that permitted, as a recent legislative change, that we would consider residents of North Carolina, all persons who receive full athletic scholarships to UNC-Chapel from entities recognized by UNC-Chapel and attend the institution as undergraduates. On behalf of the committee, I move that the Board of Trustees vote to approve the resolution regarding in-state tuition for athletic scholarship recipients.
Second. We have a second, first and second discussion.
I just want to make sure that, as we're doing this, that we keep our minds on North Carolinians and providing spots for our true residents. I understand this for financial purposes, but I hear from a lot of people that are applying and their kids aren't getting in that are North Carolina residents, and we need to allow more spots for residents of the state.
And I would add to that, Trustee Cotis, that the board 2 years ago, maybe 18 months ago, approved the chancellor's proposal to increase enrollment at the university. And we have increased it by 250, I believe, at this point. Is that right, Mr. Chancellor?
So a little more than that, about 280.
We've increased it by about 280 with an ultimate goal of an increase on that motion to 500. Is that correct? So we're moving in that. I just wanted to put that in place.
Clarity on that. Because this is something we're doing after people have already been admitted, right? In terms of what your status would be. So I don't see how it would impact any North Carolinians anyway, because if we're only saying that your status for the purposes of economics would be treated this way, it's not going to impact the admissions process. It's happening after the admissions process, right?
That's.
But there's a cap. There's the cap issue, and that's where it becomes.
Right, but I mean, I just don't see how it would hurt.
They may
North
become a
Carolinians.
little
Maybe that's why I'm confused.
less risk adverse in terms of, they may admit a few, the question is always, what's the yield of out of state? So they always admit more. This, if it's 90, 120 students that are impacted by this, they might be willing to admit more, knowing that the yield, it may keep us yet under the cap.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second from Trustee Patel. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, ayes have it.
Thank you. The committee also voted to approve a request from the provost office for a second temporary amendment of the university's tenure policy to allow tenure track faculty members who have not already requested an extension of the tenure clock due to COVID-19, the opportunity to do so through May of 2023. On behalf of the committee, I move that the board vote to approve this requested temporary tenure policy amendment.
I have a motion to increase the tenure, to modify the tenure clock to give an additional 12 months under the conditions that Provost Clemens described to the committee yesterday. Do I have a second to that motion? Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. All right, the ayes have it.
In closed session, we discussed and approved requested personnel action items, including 20 promotions conferring tenure, 2 new appointments conferring tenure, and 8 compensation actions. 3 of these compensation actions were approved by the committee in closed session because they require further action and approval of the Board of Governors in order to become final. On behalf of the committee, I move that the Board of Trustees vote to approve the remaining requested final personnel action items, including 20 promotions conferring tenure, 2 new appointments conferring tenure, and the 5 final compensation actions.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second from trustee Artis Neal. Any further discussion? I have trustee Cotis. Yes, sir.
Not to belabor the point, but again, I'd voice my opposition to the concept of tenure as we go through the all funds budget. I just feel like tenure handicaps the university. I understand there are people that embrace the concept. I don't, and therefore will be voting against it.
Any additional comments or discussion? All right, in that case, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it.
Finally, the committee also reviewed and approved revised faculty salary ranges for the School of Information and Library Science and for the School of Law. On behalf of the committee, I move that the Board of Trustees vote to approve these revised faculty salary ranges.
I have a motion on the floor to approve revised salary ranges for the School of Law and for the School of Information Sciences, Information and Library Sciences. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
I have a second from trustee Artis Neal. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Any
Concludes
further
my
business?
remarks.
All right, great. So just to say thank you, and I do want to explain, again, we were in closed session. We did, part of that was executive session that the chair called. It was for the purpose of explaining and articulating the biennial review process of the chancellor. No review of the chancellor was held today. Only the process was described to individual board members, and we'll move forward pursuant to policy set by the UNC system office from here. So with that being said, do I have a motion to adjourn? I have a motion from Mr. Patel and I have a second from Mr. Cotis. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All those.